I think that we have already heard the Silksong from Hollow Knight's Silksong, at least part of it. Now, many of you will think, what the ever-living hell are you talking about, stizzl? And well, this video will be a step-by-step process in order to explain how I got to my conclusion, which I cheekily used as a hook for the intro. But first I will tell you about the exact roadmap for today. First we'll talk about what I mean by the Silksong from a lore perspective. Then we will take a quick look at music theory and how the concepts of leitmotifs influences the music in Hollow Knight. That way we can understand how this might work in Silksong. And lastly, the Silksong itself will be shown, at least the bits and pieces we've heard from it. I do have some really strong evidence this time around, so I would be willing to bet on this theory being right. Additionally, we'll have a guest appearance in the video from someone who's actually really good at music theory, and he will present us a straight up incredible revelation. So let's get started. As we know, Farloom, the land the game takes place in, is haunted by silk and song. Nothing new so far. Additionally, as I've mentioned time and time again, the leaders of Farloom are controlling the people below with silken strings, just like puppets. This obviously is the silk part of Silksong. Now, the most popular theory is that the Silksong itself is a melody that helps control the people of Farloom. This is also why many NPCs often play instruments, so they can drown out the so-called Silksong. So basically, as long as this melody is played and heard by the people of Farloom, the silken strings can control them, so that is why it's called Silksong. So it is natural to assume that Hornet is going to be confronted with that song head-on later in the game as she tries to save Farloom. So the Silksong could be the final song that plays during the final moments of the game. At least that is my assumption. That is all we need to know about the story for this video, and not everything I've said just now has been confirmed, mind you, but a lot of this does not seem to be a stretch at all. So let's move on. So basically this channel right here, 8-Bit Music Theory, made a video series a while ago about how genius the Hollow Knight soundtrack really is. I would advise you to watch the whole thing, but for this video I've distilled the most important parts so we can move on. A leitmotif is a recurring theme. In the case of Hollow Knight, the most important leitmotif revolves around a number of different tracks, all reimagining the same melody. For example, the main menu theme of Hollow Knight and the themes from the White Palace, the White Lady or the Hornet boss fight. Let's hear some of that, shall we? And while it is easier to hear sometimes and harder to hear other times, the leitmotif is definitely there. This is of course done this way because all of these characters are connected to each other within the story, so different iterations of the same theme are able to bring out different emotions and different aspects of this leitmotif. So Christopher Larkin, the genius behind Hollow Knight's music, is really five-heading the whole process of writing music. So naturally a similar approach can be expected for Silksong. And as it turns out, and as we'll find out later, the Hollow Knight leitmotif actually has a much more important role in Silksong than expected. Now, for the most important part of this video, let's first take one quick listen to a few words from Team Cherry from the year 2019.
Experience a stunning orchestral score. So, fan favorite Chris Larkin, the composer for Hollow Knight, is returning. You know, one of the very first things he did was compose this Silksong theme, which you can hear a bit of in the trailer in the middle section, and also there's a little excerpt.
Now, as we have heard here, Christopher Larkin has been working on the main theme for Silksong. I think given all we know about the lore of Silksong, the use of leitmotifs by Christopher Larkin, and the overall sense it would make for the main theme of Silksong to be the literal Silksong, we can conclude that the main theme of Silksong is going to be the Silksong itself, that will be used in the game to control the barks of Farloom, or at least it will share the same leitmotif. But where have we heard it? We have heard the leitmotif 3 times in total. 2 times in the reveal trailer and 1 time in the menu. But now I will let our guest for today, Moosey, who is also working for the music team in the Hollow Knight DLC I'm working on, Hollow Knight the Sanctuary, tell us more about the leitmotif of Silksong.
Hi there. The first time we hear this quote-unquote theme is actually within the announcement trailer for Silksong, way back in February of 2019, which is over 3 years ago now. and that makes me feel very old. So, if you couldn't pick up on it from that clip, here's what this possible motif sounds like on its own. It's a relatively simple little melody, using a total of 3 notes in C minor. Now, just on its own, it may be a little difficult to recognize as a motif, as opposed to just a simple melody. Well, if you listen again to that bit from the trailer, you might notice something. What's happening here is known as a sequence, specifically an ascending sequence. Larkin is essentially taking this initial melodic idea and then moving it upwards, specifically by 1 step of the scale. Notice that it's the exact same melody, only moved upwards. This then happens for a second time, which is followed by some development that leads to the conclusion of the phrase. So, from seeing this, it's obvious that Larkin is taking this 5-note melody and building on it within the music for this trailer. The melody pretty much dominates the music for the entire second half of the trailer. What isn't clear though is whether or not this melody is of any importance, or if it's just the melody that Larkin decided to use here. It's a very common thing for composers to write a piece of music by taking an initial idea and then building on it throughout the piece, as it's a great way to help a piece feel concise and familiar. In other words, just from listening to the trailer music, we can say that this could be a motif, but it could also just be a simple melody that Larkin decided to use. The kicker is what we hear at the very end of the trailer. There's that melody again. So if, at the very end of this announcement trailer, after the music and the action has all peaked and died down, we're left with one final repeat of this melody, it feels impossible to deny that Larkin is drawing our attention to it. That means it has to hold some significance, right? Well, let's step back a bit and look at Hollow Knight, the first game. I'm sure most of us recognise this melody. It's from the opening theme of Hollow Knight, the title theme. This is particularly important as, for many, this opening title screen is our first exposure to the game. And as we know, this melody that we hear here is a leitmotif, often attributed to the Hollow Knight, the player character and the vessels, and it's present throughout a large amount of the soundtrack. As such, it seems safe to assume that the title theme for Silksong will employ a similar role, right? Presumably in the title theme we'll hear a similar leitmotif that we can attribute to some key element of Silksong, be it hornet or something else. Hey, there's our 5-note motif again. Of course, here, instead of being in C minor, we seem to be in A minor, hence why the motif sounds a little different. It's also being used slightly differently, this time in a descending sequence, and with the last bar of each repeat of the motif removed. Even so, this is still very clearly the same motif we heard in the trailer. So, if we're hearing it again in the menu theme for the game, it can only mean that this motif is important. How important is somewhat unclear, but I have a bit of an idea. Whilst I was analysing this, there was something very interesting that I noticed about the motif we hear in the trailer, and the original Hollow Knight motif. These two motifs actually share the exact same 3 notes. Both are played in C minor, with the Hollow Knight motif looking like this, and the quote-unquote Silksong motif looking like this. This parallel between the two themes is actually quite amazing. If they share the same notes, it feels logical to conclude that this motif we're hearing here is Silksong's main motif, be it a Silksong motif, a Hornet motif, however you want to see it. Another interesting tidbit about this is that the Hollow Knight motif has a very clear ascending contour. This basically means that the general shape of the melody is moving upwards. Compare this to the Silksong motif, which seems to have the opposite. It's got more of a descending shape, moving downwards. When we think about how Hollow Knight was all about delving deeper into the kingdom of Hallownest, and Silksong will supposedly be about climbing to the peak of Farloom, it seems very ironic that these two motifs are clear opposites to their relative games. The Hollow Knight motif is rising, whilst the game is about descending, and the Silksong motif is descending, whilst the game is about rising. It's another very odd parallel, but it only seems to reinforce this connection further. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. I'm curious to hear what you all think, but for now, I'll pass it back to you, Stizzl.
And thanks Moosey for joining in, especially on such short notice. Like, I literally wrote him at 2 AM, so please subscribe to his channel if you want to hear some good stuff. And the revelations Moosey uncovered are quite incredible, I think. The Silksong theme and leitmotif being an opposite of sorts of Hollow Knight's leitmotif is, to be honest, crazy and works on so many different levels that I can't really address them all in this video right here. And when first starting this video, I never thought that we would get so much interesting info. And all of this info all but confirms that the Silksong leitmotif will have a very similar role in Silksong as Hollow Knight's leitmotif had in its game. So yes, to get back to the start of the video, it is very likely that we have heard the Silksong already, at least the leitmotif of it. I hope I will see you all next week, and hope that you enjoyed this video, as it really proved to have far more concrete evidence than most other theories of mine. And all I needed to do to come up with such a cool theory was just to offer up a few human sacrifices to my Team Cherry altar. Like, that's so easy, I should do that every week.